All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're diving into 3 absolute chillers where the supernatural world completely overlaps with our own. And we aren't just swapping ghost stories here, we're actually deconstructing the architecture of terror. We're going to see exactly how mortal actions, our arrogance, our greed, and even the sins of our ancestors act like a beacon, drawing out these entities from the shadows.
I mean, it's the ultimate question, isn't it? Are we ever really alone? As we get into this today, I want you to keep that thought in the back of your mind. Because in the realms we're about to explore, the supernatural isn't just some random spooky occurrence, it's a direct response to human failings. We're going to examine how hubris, social injustice, and inescapable ancestral sins wake up terrifying forces that absolutely refuse to stay buried.
Part 1. Room 333. A Deadly Stay.
So, meet Annie. She's this super logical British journalist whose entire career is built on debunking the paranormal. Her latest target? London's incredibly luxurious Langham Hotel, specifically the infamous Room 333. Legend says a Victorian doctor brutally murdered his wife in there before taking his own life. The second Annie steps onto the 3rd floor, the hotel's shiny modern facade just drops. She's hit with dim yellow lights, deep shadows, faded vintage paintings, and this silence that just feels heavy. Even the receptionist, who is practically glowing with hospitality downstairs, flashes this terrified, frozen smile the moment the room is mentioned, and hands Annie an outdated, heavy physical key instead of a keycard. And when Annie finally grabs the brass handle of her door, it is inexplicably ice cold.
Now, Annie is a skeptic to her absolute core. She isn't there to get spooked, she's there to document. She sets up her tripod, gets the camera rolling, switches on the mic. She even lights a small fire just to fight off this unnatural November chill creeping into the room, and she starts researching on her laptop. She genuinely thinks she's in complete control, using modern tech as her ultimate shield against the unknown. But, spoiler alert, it isn't. Because let's face it, the unseen world really doesn't care about our logic. Dead of night, Annie gets jolted awake by a knock. She looks through the peephole and sees a butler holding a silver tray covered by a large lid. When she opens the door to tell the guy she definitely didn't order anything, he just looks at her, says, "Your room service, madam," and lifts the lid. And sitting right there on that tray, resting perfectly still, is Annie's own severed head. Literally a reality-bending, mind-melting moment. She blinks, and the butler vanishes into thin air. Totally panicking, she rushes to check all her meticulously set-up digital equipment. That ultimate shield of the modern skeptic we just talked about. But her camera's memory card is completely corrupted, the voice recorder captured absolutely nothing except the sound of her door opening and her own terrified scream. The tech she trusted so much was just neutralized.
She backs into the bathroom and bam, she confronts the real horror of Room 333. Right there, in the mirror, standing right behind her, is the rotting, decaying figure of that Victorian doctor. He's got these long nails reaching out to reenact his gruesome history. Then, the bathroom door locks itself. By the time the hotel staff finally breaks in, responding to her screaming, they find Annie completely alone. She's been driven to madness, repeatedly smashing her own head into the shattered bathroom mirror. She really thought she could outsmart the spirits, but her own hubris was her undoing.
Part 2. The Unseen World. Vengeance and Justice.
Okay, leaving the luxury of London behind, we step into our second realm, where a haunting actually turns into a quest for justice. Enter Mira Maya and Mr. Chaudhry. They're investigators operating out of a heritage hotel known as Rajbari. But they aren't your typical weekend ghost hunters. According to their guide, Babaji, they recently passed through a terrifying plane called Dakini's Realm, and it fundamentally changed them. It's like they're marked now. They have this inescapable duty, tasked by the universe to help wandering souls seek justice.
So their new abilities are put to the test right away, with the death of a young woman named Prerna. And right off the bat, there's a chilling timeline discrepancy. The official police report claims Prerna committed suicide by hanging between 6 and 7 p.m. But here's the catch. Mira Ma saw her walking outside near their hotel at 10 p.m. that exact same night. The math just doesn't add up, which means one thing: Prerna's restless spirit is still walking among the living.
Now, to figure out why her spirit is trapped, we have to impartially break down the conflicting stories surrounding her death. Her mother-in-law is very loudly claiming Prerna was a thief trying to steal ancestral jewelry, and that she was an unstable woman who wanted to harm her own unborn child. But the physical evidence and the spirit's own truth tell a completely different story.
Perna didn't steal anything. Her own jewelry was forcefully taken from her in a classic case of dowry harassment. And the claim about her baby? Actually, when her body was found, she had just finished knitting a small winter sweater for her child.
You hear these phantom echoes of Perna crying out, "I didn't do this! I didn't do this!" It's the absolute emotional core of this haunting. What we're seeing here isn't some malicious demon, it's a desperate spirit returning to clear her name. It brilliantly shows how profound social evils, like domestic abuse and devastating greed, give birth to profound supernatural unrest. The tragedy of the living is literally fueling the haunting of the dead.
Part 3. Kusumpur, the Ancestral Curse. All right, we're descending into our final and, honestly, probably most terrifying realm. A young guy named Virendra travels to his isolated ancestral village of Kusumpur to settle some old land papers. But this is not a happy homecoming. Kusumpur is Shapit, cursed. The air is just thick with fog, and the silence is deafening. The village square is completely abandoned. Locals literally lock themselves away the second the sun goes down. And for good reason, too. People have been vanishing into the night without a single trace. All that's left behind are these deep black scorch marks on the ground.
And Virendra's descent happens fast. He arrives in the evening to just oppressive silence. That very first night, he's tormented by whispers and voices calling his name from behind the walls. The next day, he's desperate for answers so he can just finish his paperwork and get out of there. But an old pundit gives him a horrifying warning about his bloodline. This pushes Virendra to make a fatal choice. At midnight, he walks out to the ruins of an old temple to uncover the truth for himself.
Now, what's really fascinating here is where the actual blame lies. Virendra is doomed, but not by his own hubris. He's doomed by the inescapable weight of his ancestry. You see, his grandfather, driven purely by greed, destroyed a sacred temple on their property, just to claim the land. And by doing that, he trapped a powerful protector spirit in the ruins, basically turning it into a vengeful force. The grandfather condemned the whole village to nightly terror, and tragically doomed his own bloodline to eventually pay the ultimate price.
So, out at the ruined temple, surrounded by scorched earth, Virendra lights a small, forgotten diya, an oil lamp, and the second that flame flickers, the trap springs. His childhood friend, Manjari, steps out from the shadows. But as he looks at her, her face just twists and contorts. She isn't Manjari anymore. She is the vessel for the demonic spirit his family trapped decades ago. To break the curse, the spirit needs the blood of the lineage that imprisoned it. The fog thickens, and Virendra is consumed, leaving behind nothing but silence and a fresh scorch mark on the earth. Part 4. What have we learned? The architecture of terror.
Let's pull back for a second and look at the big picture here, the overarching architecture of terror we've just deconstructed. We've gone from a luxurious hotel in London, through a heritage estate acting as a paranormal consultancy, all the way to a forgotten, cursed village. And the pattern is wild. In room 333, Annie's mortal sin was her arrogance and unyielding skepticism. Her consequence was confronting undeniable madness that literally broke her mind. At Rajbari, the mortal sin was a family's greed and social injustice. The consequence was a restless spirit tearing through the veil to demand truth. And in Kusumpur, the sin was ancestral hubris. The consequence was an inescapable fatal blood curse. All of these stories perfectly tie our theme together. Whether you're insulated by modern tech in a 5-star luxury hotel, surrounded by family in a modern house, or standing alone in some dusty, forgotten village, the past never truly dies. History, especially history written in cruelty or arrogance, always leaves a mark. And sometimes, that mark wakes up. So I'm going to leave you with this. We love to think we're disconnected from the darkness of the past, right? Safely moving forward in our brightly lit modern lives. But as we've seen in this explainer today, the veil between our actions and their supernatural consequences is dangerously thin. When the shadows lengthen in your own life, what past sins might be waiting for you? Just something to think about the next time you hear a creak in the floorboards. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and stay curious.